So this is Kat Squibb and Jen Garner and Amanda Gothard here with Technica Editorial. We are here with Peter Urick and Chris Schaefer, authors of Setting and Scoring Financial Goals. So thank you guys so much for meeting with us and taking the time to answer some questions for us today.
Thanks. Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So Pete and Chris, can you tell me kind of your background and how you guys met? You've been friends for a really long time, it appears.
Yeah, we actually met in college. We both played soccer at Salisbury University, and basically we met during preseason tryouts. And I don't know if I want to tell the full story, but basically, when Chris and I first met, he was taking things extremely seriously at tryouts. I was happy to be away from home and independent for the first time, and so I was making a lot of noise during off practice time and things like that. And so at one point, he actually said to our coach, he's like, "I hate this guy," but in the end. In the end, all of the other people that we knew got cut from the team, so it was kind of like we were forced together. But after that, like it's been since 1994, we've just been as close as can be, and it's not a thing that lasted. His hatred for me actually eventually, he now loves me, whether he admits it or not is another story.
No. Well, that's good to hear. So Pete, you kind of went into the teaching realm, and Chris, did you go into the financial sector? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people this one, and it's funny talking to colleagues and friends, but I mean, when I was 5 years old, I wanted to be an accountant. And even back then, I didn't know what an accountant was, but I just knew I wanted to be an accountant, right? It dealt with money and numbers, and that was my two favorite things in the world back then. So my whole career and path was designed around being that one. So through college, became a CPA, worked for a large accounting firm, moved in the finance industry. So, I mean, that's just been my go-to passion for, I hate to date myself, but almost 40 years.
Wow. And what about you, Pete? What do you teach?
So I'm a Spanish teacher. Very much had teaching in the back of my mind throughout high school. It just seemed like something that I would enjoy doing. And then eventually I started out as a math major in college, but that didn't last too long. I ended up switching over to Spanish, and I've been a Spanish teacher for 24 years now, at a variety of different places. But right now I'm at a private boarding school where I teach and I coach and I do dorm duty, and it's like this kind of 360 view of dealing with kids, and so that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Great. And so what inspired this book? Did you see something with your students perhaps that led to this?
Actually, to be quite honest with you, it kind of sprung out of the pandemic, and I had read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was kind of dealing with some financial stuff on my own, and I was looking into, all right, well, I need to understand this concept a little bit better. And as I was thinking about it, I was like, well, my best friend is a financial planner. Maybe I should talk to him about the concept. And so he and I ended up having a cursory discussion really about some basic stuff. And at one point, it just hit me. I'm like, we both love soccer, and I know that this concept is kind of dry. What if it actually, if you could explain finance to me in a way that like related it to soccer, I think that it could be a little bit more interesting, and I could have, my attention would be, piqued just that little bit more. And so that's really the genesis of it. And it started out as some very, beginning conversations about how the two related and everything like that. Because that's one of the things that I do as a teacher all the time. It's, a kid who doesn't want to learn Spanish, and I've got to find that way to, Trojan horse the ideas into their head as best as I possibly can. And that was kind of the way I was thinking as we started this discussion.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And have you kind of brought, like in the writing process, have you brought kind of more of like the goofy, personable realm, and Chris is more the serious, like finance?
Is that a mustache comment?
Voice of reason.
I swear this is for good reasons. At the moment we're in that no shave November about mental health and everything, and so my school is really big into it. So that's why the mustache
I
exists.
love it. I don't hate it.
That's fantastic.
But yes, like my job was really the metaphor. Chris was bringing all of the financial knowledge and 20 plus years worth of his background going into a book that my job was to kind of shoehorn things where it's like, how does this relate to soccer? And as a coach and a teacher and everything like that, my idea was always to get the idea to work within a framework that might make sense to a kid or a young adult that has played soccer before. And yes, I bring the goofy side in the professional sense. I will let you know that off camera, Chris and I are both equally as goofy, but in the public realm, I'm happy to put that side out.
Right. Happy to wear that.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay.
Perfect.
I don't want to interrupt Jen. I am curious just about, we have two authors now. So how difficult is it to collaborate? How did you do that? Was one doing the bulk of the writing? Did you have a shared Google Doc? I'm always so curious to know how people collaborate when they're writing a book together.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Pete said it perfectly. I mean, we had a lot of conversations kind of off script or on the side about what we want to do, how we want to do it. So in many ways, a lot of the writing was just done over conversation. If I can say it on the podcast, maybe over a beer or two, or on Zoom or whatever it may be, just talking about what we want to do and how we want to do it. And again, I think we both had the right idea. We both knew what we wanted to do, how we were going to get there. I don't think either of us knew how to do that one. Pete obviously had more experience. I think he's published, 3 books now or 2 books now? Excuse me, Pete, if I don't remember exactly the number. But
this is the third.
Yeah, third one. So I mean, this was new for me. But again, I think getting the concept down and just talking between each other, I think was very easy. And I don't think there was no conflicts. I don't think we both had different ideas or different viewpoints, but having those conversations back and forth, I think was very easy. And really, I think for the most part, Pete kind of put the words on the paper. Would send me a paragraph or a chapter or whatever it may be. And again, yeah, I think as Pete mentioned, I mean, the technical side of it is my area. So yeah, I would say, okay, we need to tweak this part or think about this part, or maybe the metaphor is not right here. We need to adjust it this way. But I think it was a good collaboration overall, and I think it worked really well, together. And I will say one of the things that we said initially was that if this book or this concept got in the way of our friendship, we're done. That was never worth it for either one of us. And I'm very happy to say that I think not only has kept our relationship, I think in many ways it's improved it, solidified it, and we're closer than we've ever been.
That's great.
That's wonderful. I love hearing that.
And from the technical, the nuts and bolts side, basically the document was written in. At the beginning, it started out as a Google Doc that we were sharing and everything like that. And then as we started working with your people for the editing process and stuff like that, then it turned into a Word doc that, got edited many, many times. I think for both of us, I think we both had the initial idea of this process for us in the way of our writing was going to be a lot quicker because of the fact that, like, with family and and jobs and everything like that, the collaboration part I think might have slowed things down, as opposed to if one author was writing this book, it probably could have gotten done a little bit quicker. But because of the fact that we're setting up meeting times and discussing things and stuff like that, it probably took a lot longer than we ever had anticipated. But I think that length of time that it took actually ended up at a better product.
Nice. Great.
Very cool.
Let's talk a little bit about. Oh, you're gonna go, Jen? I'm sorry.
I was gonna sneak in there, Amanda.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about your inspiration for writing this book, but let's talk a little bit about your why. What was the reasoning behind writing this book? What do you want your readers to take away from it?
So
Go ahead, Pete. Or go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the why for me is financial literacy overall. So in my profession, I get the opportunity to work with a lot of retirees and near retirees, middle class, but I also get the opportunity to talk to a lot of young folks, with high school, college, or just out of college. And it just always took me back to when I graduated from college. Again, CPA, accounting major, finance guy. I mean, I know everything about this world. And when I sat down for my first job, I got a packet of information, and it was talking about health insurance and disability insurance and 401k. And I'm like, I don't know what any of this stuff is. So I had to call my father, again, an accounting finance major, calling my father, who's an attorney, to understand what these things are. So for me, that's always been kind of the light bulb that, wow, this is something that not only me, what about the architect out there? What about the English major, the philosophy major? I mean, the engineer.
Mhm.
We're so focused on what our career is that we're not getting this basic financial literacy. And it's been something I've been thinking about my whole life. In my career, I do a lot of presentations, workshops, if you will, trying to address this and talk about it. But, as Pete came to me with that concept is, yeah, how do we translate it? Because no 20-year-old is going to pick up a book about personal finance. We all know that. But yeah, can we make it a fun topic, an interesting topic? But for me, that's always been the genesis of where it's coming from, is financial literacy and getting high school, college, young adults on the right steps so that they'll be where they want to be 25 years in the future. So that's kind of where I've always come from.
Yep. And
That
it
makes
falls in
perfect
line
sense.
with my personal thing is, as a teacher and everything like that. If you break me down to my core, I'm on this planet to help people. And this is a way to go about it. Chris is absolutely right. There's plenty of financial books out there that explain personal finance, but is anybody going to pick them up? Because that's all that it is. And by, kind of, again, using a Trojan horse type of technique, I think that this is a way to get that information across to people that under normal circumstances may not pick up that other financial book.
Right. Right.
Make it more palatable for everybody. I know,
Right.
like, math is not my strong suit, and in college, like, every math class, it was just terrible. And I think I had to do everyday math where it was like actual like interest rates and I was like, well, this makes sense. Like, I don't need to know all the other stuff. I need to know the stuff I'm going to be using. So I feel like that makes perfect sense and kind of making finance a little more attainable, the knowledge behind that.
Yes.
Exactly
It's
right.
definitely a book I feel like I could have used in my youth for sure.
Yep. And what we're planning on doing, and this is obviously a long-term play for us. Soccer was the first book because it's the sport that we're both passionate about. But the next step is we're going to do an American football book. We're going to do a basketball one. We're going to do a baseball one, and we're going to try and use this metaphor over and over again so that we're hitting as many different groups as possible in order to, again, make it palatable. That word is a great way to put it, is make it palatable for people who under normal circumstances really probably wouldn't get the education in this space.
Nice.
That's really awesome that you're making it a series. I love that.
Now, being that soccer is kind of your bailiwick, are there going to be their own set of unique challenges, kind of equating it to other sports that you may not have as in-depth of knowledge with?
So the football book is the next one because of the fact that A, it's probably the most popular American sport, and B, it actually, there is a huge crossover between American football and soccer. I know that it doesn't look like there is, but actually, if you look at it like as a family, soccer is the grandfather of American football. And the reason why it exists the way that it does is because 150 years ago, a guy was playing soccer and decided, oh, I'm going to pick the ball up and I'm going to run with it. And that turned into rugby. And then rugby eventually turned into American football. And so there's a lot of crossovers that we can use that, wouldn't make a lot of sense to somebody who, has never played soccer or has never played football. Luckily, my younger brother's a head football coach and things like that. So we've got people that we're going to involve in the process of, like, okay, how can I make this metaphor work for something like, baseball is probably the one that I haven't really wrapped my head around how that's going to work. Basketball, I've got a pretty good idea of how I'm going to make that work, and I'm going to discuss some of the points with, former colleagues who are basketball coaches and things like that. But, ultimately, I think it can work for most things. I don't know that it works for everything, but at bare minimum, we're going to try and get it into as many different versions so that, again, it hits a variety of people.
And to take a step further, I mean, I'm located in the DC area. Lacrosse is again another very big sport in the DMV here in DC. So again, I think it translates over well. So tennis, volleyball, may take some time to figure it out, but I'm confident Pete and I can do it.
Hockey, we're in North Carolina. Hockey is very big here.
Hockey, yeah, exactly. So we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Nice. Can't wait to see what you guys do.
Ooh. So let's take a peek kind of behind the curtain. Authors and aspiring authors, when they listen to these things, they always want to know about the publishing process and what that was like for you guys. So working with an editor, some people are always very nervous about that, thinking that their work is going to be torn apart. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience working with an editor and the general publication process?
Yeah. So this is the first time that I've dealt with a publisher. My first two books were 100%, bootstrapped, self-published. I did all of the work. I had, an English teacher friend who edited the book kind of, and things like that. So this was definitely a more in-depth process, and we did it this way on purpose. We wanted to make sure that we were putting a good product out into the world. So with regards to the editing process, I personally, having been writing a blog post for years and doing my own thing, I've kind of gotten used to the fact that I put things out there and they just exist as they are. And then eventually now having somebody look at my stuff and say, oh, well, you need a comma here, you need to reword this or change that. It really didn't bother me that much. It was always with the end goal in mind of, I want this to be a good product. Now, the one thing that we did try and do is make sure that we didn't lose our voice within there. It was, there was a few things that came back. It's like, well, you might want to change this. And we're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I can understand why we might want to change that. Because, one of the suggestions from the editor originally, which again, we were just writing it on our own, not thinking too much about the marketing, but it was, okay, well, you've got all male players. Do you want to add in some female players as the metaphor develops in order to, possibly market to a different demographic? And it's like, oh, well, didn't even think of it. Not because of the fact that we didn't want to have a female readership. It was just not thinking about a marketing thing. It was, we were writing. We were just writing and not really 100% considering what the other avenues were for this book. And so that was a great thing to have, another set of eyes that, do this on a regular basis and saying, this works, this might need some tweaking, and it was helpful. And, the addition of the aesthetic when we finally got to, adding photos and all of that stuff, extremely helpful. I would, making this thing look as good as it does is not something I could have done. So that fact, and you can tell the stark difference between the first two books that I did very much on my own, and then this one, there's no, it's light years ahead. And I understand that that's supposed to happen, but at the same time, it was definitely worth the effort of going through the editing process. And Chris, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, no, I think from my standpoint, I mean, we're not giving advice per se, because I mean, there's certainly a book like this is not designed to give advice, but we're trying to educate, inform, and I think you lose all credibility if you have misspelled words or punctuation out of there. Or again, I think one of the things that we struggle with was the first person, third person point of view. So I think having an editor kind of go through that and make sure that everything flowed well. They changed paragraphs or the order of paragraphs. I think that was very helpful, because at the end of the day, I think when we're doing something like this one, yeah, it is for entertainment, but it is also education. And I think you need the credibility to have it there, that when you put this thing out, that when people read it, they say, okay, this is truly a educational piece. It's put together well. It's got all the correct punctuation and things like that one. And that, again, as a finance, accounting, numbers guy, that's not my area of expertise. So to have someone behind the scenes kind of go through that and talk to us about it and suggested changes, I think was a great thing. So I would highly recommend that part of it.
Great.
Awesome.
So happy to hear that you had such a good experience with that. So can you tell us a little bit about, actually just give us some tips for aspiring writers?
Okay.
That's you, Pete.
Yeah, exactly. So
We want your advice here.
Yeah, we discussed this last night, and Chris was like, anything that we're talking about writing, it's like he's the information guy, I was the writing guy. But you know, the one thing that I would suggest, well, there's many things that I would suggest, but one of the best things that I read when I started the first book, I think I started reading On Writing by Stephen King. It's like such, even if you're not a fan of Stephen King, and I know that there's a lot of people who are not into his type of writing, it gave me a few tools to put into the toolbox that were extremely helpful. And one of the things that, he talks about is writing every day. And I don't write every day, and I will freely admit that. But the cadence of just putting something down on paper on a regular basis, it builds a muscle of, ideas come to you much more freely. That's why I've been writing a blog for over 10 years now. It just, that ability to, in air quotes, put pen to paper and just not worry so much about the fact that this has to be perfect. I need to create something that's magical. It's no, I've got to show up and I got to write for an hour today or half an hour or whatever it is, and just getting into that whole entire thing. And then really, just being willing to put your ideas out there and recognize that they're going to resonate with somebody. At bare minimum, even if you want to look at it as you have at least one person in your audience is, yourself. If you write something and you find it interesting, then you have an audience of one. And there's, in the world of 7 billion people or however many there are now, is we have more than enough people in this world that would probably resonate with what you are writing. And I think that you have a greater opportunity than ever to hit your audience with, social media and the internet and everything. We actually can get people reading things. I have people reading my blog post in Nepal and, Tunisia and stuff like that, and India. And I don't know how they stumble upon me, but, if it resonates with them and they get something out of it, then great.
And actually, I would add something on that one. I mean, I think for a young aspiring writer or even an old aspiring writer, just do it. Just do it. I talked about doing a finance book internally myself for many years, and again, there's no reason, there's no incentive, no urgency to do that one. Again, until Pete and I kind of had the conversation about it. So do it. And I think the hardest part is with everything is the fear of rejection. So you put something out there in public that people are now reading, and what's the response going to be? One of my major inspirations was I shared it with a group of people, and one of the people laughed at me. I thought this was a ridiculous idea and never thought it would happen. And for me internally, okay, now you've challenged my my desire. I'm going to prove you wrong. And at minimum, we're going to get it done. We're going to publish it. It's going to be out there. Now, whether it's well received or not, obviously we hope it's going to be. But again, overcoming that fear of rejection or whatever you want to call it, I think is a hard part. And I would just say for all the writers out there, just do it. Your knowledge about your topic, put it on paper, do the best you can, get an editor to make it as as clean as possible, and put it out there. And I think that's a hard thing for people to do, but I encourage everyone to do that.
Those are some great words to end with. Thank you. I want to know, do you guys want to share where the listeners can find your book? And if there's any blog posts you mentioned, do you want to share your blog, any socials? Now's your time.
Yeah, so the website for the the book and future books is sportsfinancellc.com. We obviously intended this to be a series, and it will be, but that's going to be the home for everything. But the book, again, Setting and Scoring Financial Goals, is on Amazon, and it's available online, relatively easily found. And then my personal blog is my last name, HURYK, unlimited.com. So urikunlimited.com. And, again, my blog is kind of separate from the book. It's not 100% linked, although, a lot of the ideas are semi-similar, but they do that same, Trojan horsing of ideas into things.
And we are looking to launch our own podcast after first of the year. So, tune in to sportsfinancellc.com and you'll see some things coming out in 2024.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
We can't wait. And then, yeah, we're looking forward to you guys getting started with the American football book, and we look forward to seeing that. So
Spectacular.
thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.